I offer my most loving pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. I pray to Swami that he gives all of us the understanding. It is Swami who speaks, and it is Swami who listens through each one of us. Loving Sai Ram and greetings from Prashant Nilayam. It gives us immense delight to welcome you all again for another episode of the Satsang series that we've been having from Prashant Nilayam. As we make it a point to tell you every time, this is not a series where some of us are learned enough to convey something to you. Swami's message is immense and so very liberating, to say the least. And it is important for all of us to engage with it, to contemplate on it. And this is a series where we get the opportunity to literally think out aloud whatever we are ruminating over, whatever we are reflecting within ourselves. I think Swami also gives us the opportunity to share those thoughts with you viewers and listeners, and I'm ever grateful for that opportunity. I want to begin with two statements that is often told to us in spiritual discourse, which somewhat looks a bit contradictory. On one hand, we are told about the eventuality of what happens in this life. Some would say there is only one certainty in life. There are a lot of possibilities. You could become rich, you could become poor, you could be a very learned person, you could lead a long life, you could have a short life, you could be living in the country you were born in, you could travel a lot. Possibilities are a lot. But if there is one certainty about life, some would say that certainty is death. Every life form that comes into existence will have to die. You have the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, what we refer to as Sankhya Yoga, where Krishna reiterates to Arjuna again and again how this body is nothing but a dress that you've worn. A time will come when you discard it, and one should not make much about the event of death. Right? On one hand, it is almost spoken as though this life should not be taken too seriously. Right? That's what it kind of conveys. But on the other hand, whatever we do in life, whatever we are asked to do in life, is in a way to preserve this life. The brain is created in such a way that it sustains this body. The mind preserves this idea of the self. And not only that, we've had the opportunity to live with Swami, we continue to live with Swami, and we've seen how Swami's grace comes to us in the form of protecting this life many a times. I recollect there was one lecturer who was when I was studying in Vrindavan, and this lecturer had met with a very serious accident, and he should not have survived that accident. It was quite a freakish accident, and we all knew how Swami came to his protection, and Swami ensured that he came out of that accident without even a scratch. The most interesting thing was, almost every time Swami would walk past this lecturer, Swami would make it a point to stop, look at all of us students around, and recollect that episode of how Swami saved his life. And in the few years I've been in Vrindavan, I've heard it from Swami a few times. Then you can imagine Swami was repeatedly telling, he had a very bad accident, he should have died in that accident, but I saved him. If life is actually not so important as it is made to sound, why is such a big deal made about Swami coming and protecting our life? Why do we often look at Swami's grace in protection of this life or the well-being of this body as being a great gift? Isn't it somewhat contradictory? Swami would often quote this line, and I'm sure we all have heard it any number of times in his discourses. Swami says, Jantu nam nara janma durlabham. This human life, nara janma, is very precious among all the life forms. It's a statement we've heard many times. There is one discourse that Swami delivered in the year 1973 as part of the summer course, where Swami actually discusses this statement a little more and explains it a little more. Swami says, what is a jantu? You might say living beings or animal forms. Swami says the word jantu or even the word janma comes from the root word jan, which somewhat points to the womb. So Swami says jantu are all living forms that are actually born after spending a time in the mother's womb. So it's not all life forms, but specifically life forms which begin their life in the womb. So now if you say jantunam narajanma durlabham, among those life forms which are given birth through the mother's womb, to be born a human being is very, very special. So that makes it a little more specific, but still it doesn't completely clear the contradiction I started off with. Is the human body important? Is human life important? Or should we take it easy? There's a very interesting Upanishad, not very popular, it's considered one of the minor Upanishads, called the Garbhopanishad. Garbha, as we know, it means the womb. So there is this Garbhopanishad. I should make it a point that I have not come across any reference where Swami has specifically spoken about this Upanishad. But there is a very interesting discourse that I came across. The discourse was delivered by Swami in 1997 during the Shivratri celebrations, where Swami actually makes references without naming the Upanishad. He makes a few points which actually come from this Upanishad, sort of validating whatever this Upanishad says. But what is interesting about this Garbhopanishad? In this spiritual text, it actually describes quite in detail about the genesis of the fertilized egg, that becoming the embryo, eventually becoming the fetus, and the fully developed human offspring. The entire science of embryology is actually described in that Upanishad. Going back to that discourse where Swami was making a reference to this, Swami makes a very interesting point. I'm going to make that point as I heard it from Swami, with the honest disclaimer that I don't claim to have understood whatever Swami said. But what Swami said kind of hints at some things which we could pay attention to. Swami says that every life form is born in darkness. Every life form is born in darkness. And the word for darkness in the language of Sanskritam is tamaha. Tamas. Tama means darkness. So Swami says there are two syllables here, ta and ma. Ta stands for two things. Swami says it stands for nectar and space. Space because it represents the womb. So Swami says ta stands for nectar and womb. The syllable ma stands for poison and time. Right? Ta stands for nectar and space. Ma stands for poison and time. So the birth happens through this tamas, which is a combination of time and space, immortality and mortality. A very profound point that Swami is making, which means this life that we have taken itself is subject to time and space. Right? This physical body, this physical existence is governed by time and space. But at the same time, in this human existence, there is one aspect that comes from immortality, but there is a certain aspect that comes from mortality or limitedness. As I said, the Garbhopanishad gives this detailed description of how this embryo goes through the progress and eventually becomes a child. I'm not going to go into all the details that the Upanishad speaks about. I don't think it's really relevant for us, but a few points that the Upanishad mentions, and more importantly, the few points that Swami mentions in the same discourse where he was talking about the development of the embryo. Swami says that in the beginning, this life begins as a water bubble. It's quite interesting. Swami says this whole life, when I say life, it means this body begins as a water bubble. How often have we heard Swami say that the body is a water bubble, the mind is a mad monkey, right? So it really is the case. The body actually begins as a water bubble. And then Swami says on the 7th day, it becomes oil, which perhaps means the fats and proteins start forming in this water bubble, and that's when it becomes this bubble of oil, perhaps. And then Swami says, on the 15th day, it takes the form of a pinda, or a ball of flesh. On the 30th day, it becomes what we refer to as the fetus. Then comes an interesting point. Very specifically, Swami says, and this is what the Garbha Upanishad also proclaims, on the 210th day, the Jivatma enters this fetus. This is when actually life truly begins, the 210th day, the 7th month. Now comes a few more interesting points. I think this is where, this is the most important reason I'm quoting this Upanishad and the discourse which Swami was giving. After the Jivatma has entered in the 7th month, by the 8th month, the Jivatma actually recollects all the lifetimes that the soul has progressed or traveled through. All the various lifetimes it has led, mistakes it has done, pursuits it has undertaken, the spiritual efforts that it has put in. Imagine everything, all the memory comes at that point, in the 8th month of that child's growth. Not only is this the memory of the Jivatma, the Garbha Upanishad specifically says that at this point, the Jivatma actually realizes its oneness with the Pranava, the primordial sound. It knows that I am actually not separate from that source. And having recollected all of this entire journey and this lifetime that it is going to undertake, the Jivatma actually takes a resolve. He says, this lifetime, I'm not going to miss the opportunity. This time when I'm born, I am not going to get lost in ignorance. The Jivatma says, I will hold on to the feet of the Lord. I will contemplate on Brahman and I will release myself. I will not lose this opportunity this time. Imagine that is the resolve that this Jivatma actually takes at that point in time. Then we all might ask, what happens after that? The Upanishad says, and even Swami has said this elsewhere, that at the moment of birth, this entire memory is wiped out. And the child is born completely blank, unaware of this entire journey. Swami says in one of his discourses, imagine the plight of that child that is born from complete knowledge to complete darkness, complete ignorance. And that is why the child screams and cries, because of this sudden engulfing of darkness that happens at the point of birth. There is this beautiful poem that Swami writes. Actually, it's like a folk song. Swami writes this in Sandeha Nivarani. It's a very interesting song. I think many of you might be aware of it, where Swami writes it in the form of a song for a puppet show. Tai 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 bomma, Swami writes. And in fact, the way Swami introduces this, he tells to that imaginary devotee with whom the conversation is happening in the Sandeha Nivarani. Swami says, I will give you a song. You go through the song, you contemplate on what it says. It will lead you to developing vairagya. Right? And in that, Swami writes one of the first few paragraphs in that, Swami says, imagine this child is born without knowing where it is, who it is, what this journey is all about. And when in that pain the child cries, everybody stands around and celebrates the birth of the child. As everyone celebrates, you cry, and Swami even says that, oh my God, I'm born again. So that is precisely how this life actually begins. So we are born to that moment of darkness. And that is why we begin with that cry, Swami says. But then the question is still begging, what is special about the human birth then? Why jantunam narajanma durlabham? When I said that when you say jantu, it means every living form that begins with a womb, perhaps this experience of being plunged into darkness from knowledge happens to every jantu that actually goes through this process of being delivered from the womb. And when Swami says jantunam narajanma durlabham, maybe it is only in this human birth we have the opportunity to gain or to attain that knowledge again that has been so unceremoniously taken away from us at the point of birth. Perhaps all other jantus will have to live their life in that darkness, helplessly. But only the human form gives us the opportunity to gain back that knowledge that we have lost. So we begin the journey in this way. We don't know who we are. We don't know where we have landed ourselves in, where we are supposed to reach. What are we meant to do with this life? So where is this journey going? The journey begins at nowhere, but where is this journey taking us? Some of us who have read a lot of Swami's writings, who have heard discourses of Swami, who have read other Upanishads and spiritual texts, might say that, yeah, we know that we are supposed to get to this destination, the supreme goal, mukti, liberation, whatever we would like to name that, sakshatkar, self-realization. In fact, Swami puts it very, very beautifully when we spoke about birth and death being an eventuality that is certain. Swami says, just because death follows birth and birth follows death, man has the tendency to conclude that we are born to die. Right? Swami says that if you ask for what are you born, I mean, you might achieve any number of things midway, but we are born because to eventually die, and we die to be born again. Swami says this is not the right way to look at life. Because if you look at life this way, all that we will be doing in this entire process is only preparing for death. Right? That would be a very gloomy approach to life itself. Swami gives a very beautiful analogy, a very sweet example. Swami says, imagine there is a sick person, and when we fall sick, what do? We go to a doctor, we get some medicines prescribed for ourselves, and we start taking those medicines that have been advised for us. So if you go to a person who is taking such medicines, Swami says, and you ask him, why are you taking medicines? That person might say, so that I become well again. But that is not the right answer, Swami says. The correct answer is, you take medicines so that you don't have to take medicines again. Swami says that is the right answer to why are you taking medicines. I'm taking medicines so that I don't have to take medicines again. Why do I go to a doctor? So that I don't need a doctor. Why am I undergoing treatment? So that I don't need this treatment. So to the question, why are we born? Swami says the correct answer is, so that I am not born again. Why do I die? So that I do not die again. Going back to that discourse that I was telling, 1973, when Swami was speaking about the beautiful work, Bhaja Govindam. Swami says, why specifically that? This idea that you should not be born again. Swami would often quote those lines of the Bhaja Govindam, Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, Punarapi Janani Jatare Shayanam. You're born again, you die again, and you again lie in the womb of the mother. Swami quoting these lines, he asks, why is Adi Shankara specifically referring to the time the Jivatma spends in the womb, the individual soul lying in the womb? Why is such a big scene being made out of that? Swami gives two specific reasons, very important reasons to keep in our mind and contemplate upon. When this Jivatma remembers this entire journey, it sort of realizes who it really is, its divine legacy, so to say. It asks itself, me being so glorious, should I be trapped in a small space like this, wallowing in my own filth? Swami says that apparently is the greatest insult to this Jivatma, that me being so great, me being one with the Lord, me being free by nature, I am trapped in this tiny space to be discarded to the state that I am trapped in now. And typically in Swami's beautiful style, Swami says, "Chi, I should never come back to this again." The Jivatma resolves. So it is like one of the greatest tragedies of the Jivatma to be trapped in that womb. The second point that Swami makes, again a very important point, that time that is spent in the mother's womb, that individual soul becomes so indebted to the mother who protects the child in the womb, who sustains the child in the womb, that this give and take with that other soul that mothers this child in the womb, Swami says, is immense. So it becomes like a huge burden of debt that this individual soul has to repay. But of course, it is not like a give and take that we otherwise speak about, because Swami says the truest gratitude that you can show a mother, right? You have been in a mother's womb for 9 months and you've given immense inconvenience to that mother. The truest gratitude that you can show a mother is to ensure that you don't give the same pain to another mother. Swami says that is the whole idea of this journey of being born again, and that is why Adi Shankara specifically says, Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, Punarapi Janani Jatare Shayanam. It is like the Jivatma saying that, oh God, I'm doing this. I'm putting another soul through this. When will I put an end to this? But let's leave aside all of this bookish knowledge aside, if I could put it that way, because this is like, as I can think of it, going into an exam hall with having all the answers written in a secret paper. That doesn't help us in any way. Let us begin with where we all begin with. Let's begin with that darkness. Let's begin this journey from that nowhere. We are born, we don't know who we are, we don't know where we are from, we don't know anything about this journey. We don't know what we are going to achieve. We don't know what we have, what wherewithal we have to achieve what we are going to achieve. Swami says that that point of birth, when you're just born, the child cries out, and that cry is a very specific question, Swami would say. The child says, Koham, Koham, Koham. Who am I? Who am I? That is the question with which each one of us have been born. But some series of interesting things happens after that. When I ask, who am I? One person comes and says, you are my child. You are my son. You are my daughter. And if I were to, of course, we were too young to ask that question back at that point in time. But if we were to look at that individual and ask, who are you? What would be the answer they would have given? They would have said, I am your father or I am your mother. There's an interesting way of looking at this. What is the answer that we have been given when we ask this question of who am I? Let's say I'm getting ready for work in the morning. I'm trying to gather all my things before I leave for work. And I'm not able to find my keys. And I ask my mother, have you seen my keys? And let's say my mother tells me, oh, your keys, it's next to your wallet. And I ask my mother, where is my wallet? And she says, the wallet is next to the keys. And I ask her, where is my wallet and my keys? And she says, they're next to each other. I ask a question and I've been given answers. The answers, each one factually correct, but practically useless to me, isn't it? To the question, who am I? When someone comes and says, I am your father. And to the question, who are you? If he says, you're my child and I'm your father, right? When I ask, who am I? He says, you're my son. And I ask, who are you? He says, I'm your father. It is like telling the wallet is next to the keys and the keys are next to the wallet. Arbitrary answers which are of no use to us. And if we were to ask, okay, who are you? And the person say, my grandfather probably might come and say, he's my son. And this goes nowhere, right? This answer is of no use to us. So through this, what actually happens at the time of birth is we never find the right answer to this question, but we are only given a variety of labels that are stuck on us. Shortly thereafter, we are given a name. Slowly, we are taught a language. We are made to feel that I belong to that language, right? And then there are more complications, religion, caste. All are labels that are given to us which actually turn us away from the right answer of who am I. There's this beautiful short story that I came across one time. There is this businessman who is a very spiritually minded person who suddenly takes up to the spiritual path. He says, I should go and find a guru and I should start seriously on a path of sadhana. So he goes to the guru and he prostrates in front of him. He says, Guru, please accept me and please lead me on this path of spiritual sadhana. So the guru looks at him and he says, I don't know who you are. Who are you? So the man says, I am Ramesh, or whatever is the name. And the guru asks him, no, that is your name. Who are you? The man is a little taken aback and he says, I'm a businessman. That is your profession. Who are you? And he says, I'm so-and-so's son. Well, that is your antecedents. But who are you? Then the guru says, answer this question. That itself will be your sadhana. Find answers to this question. That itself is the path of inquiry. So we all have begun this journey of being thrown into darkness, asking this question of who am I, given unsatisfactory answers, and we have sort of filled our life with these answers which are all arbitrary, which are never actually of any worth to us. And thereafter, every decision that we make, every choice that we make, every activity that we take up is all based on these answers which actually are nothing but labels that have been stuck on us. There is this very beautiful novel, I'm sure many of you must have read. It's a classic spy novel by the great writer Robert Ludlum. The name of the novel is Bor Identity. I'm sure that must strike a chord. It's a very interesting story, very similar to the story that is the story of you and me. This man begins his journey. He wakes up, I think, on a beach or something like that, and he realizes that he doesn't remember anything about himself. He doesn't know his name. He doesn't know what he does for a profession. He doesn't know how he landed up on the shore of that beach. But all that he has is flashes of memory here and there. Some scenes flash in front of him. Suddenly, as he is going through life, he starts manifesting certain talents and skills. That is when he realizes that he has those talents. He comes across a few people who recognize him. And then slowly he figures out that he's a spy, he's leading a double life. And there are some people who know his real life, some people who think that the pretend life that he was putting in front of them was the real life. So you can imagine the amount of confusion. So the whole story is how he pieces his life together and finds out who he really is, who has done this to him, and he gets back to the mission that he actually started with. Pretty much the case with all of us, isn't it? We all have been thrown into that darkness, our memory taken away from us by force. But when we look within, there are a lot of hints. As Swami beautifully said, our journey begins with tama. It begins with nectar and poison, immortality and mortality, unlimitedness and limitedness. So both these hints are coming from within us. And then we look around, there are hints around us too. But are we smart enough to read all these hints and discover who we are? And that is this life's journey. Before we come to what has to be done, what could be done based on whatever Swami has said, let me begin with two mistakes that we do, or two mistakes which we should not be doing. The first one is to not start this inquiry at all. Having been born a human, that is why Swami would repeatedly say that you've taken a human birth, which is so precious. The possibility of breaking away from this ignorance and finding the right answers, you have it now. So the first mistake is not to begin this inquiry at all. As I said, we have been given multiple labels, and all that we do in life is only to serve these labels. I belong to this nation, I belong to this family, this is my profession, these are my people I have to protect. When we never search for the identity of who we really are, we will never know what we are meant to do with this life, isn't it? Can we seriously ask these questions? Can I really just be this body? Not very long ago, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years ago, this body was so different. Today it is so different. 20 years from now, this body is going to be so different. Can I really be this body? And it is said that, once in every 7 or 8 years, much of your body cells are actually regenerated. So that collection of human cells, which we referred to by this name, actually is no more there. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, what I referred to as myself perhaps has completely changed. 80% or 70% of those body cells have gone away and new cells have taken their place. But I still claim that this body is me. Can we really ask ourselves these serious questions? Am I really this body? Am I really this mind, which is constantly undergoing change? Every time we read a book, the mind changes. The mind undergoes modification. Every time we learn a new skill, every time we learn or acquire a new talent, there is a change in the mind. And just as I said, if you're talking about the mind, we started with complete blankness. So is that blankness me, or is this present where I have a certain amount of knowledge and understanding and skill? Is this me? If this is me, tomorrow if I become more intelligent, is that not me? Then how can I be the mind that undergoes constant change? If we do not ask these questions at all, we have been given a grand opportunity, but it has slipped from our hands. The second mistake that we have to avoid doing, as Swami would say, is having been born a Nara to continue to live like a Jantu. Having attained a human life to continue in an animal life. What does that really mean? Swami puts it in a very, very simple example. Swami says you stand in front of an animal like a goat. On one hand you hold a stick, on the other hand you hold a bunch of leaves. Towards which hand or towards which side will the goat go? It will go towards the leaves. It will go towards what it perceives as pleasure, and it will move away from what it perceives as pain. If we are going to live this entire life that is in front of us, only driven by what we like and steered away from what we dislike, we decide every step forward based on what I desire and what I fear. Swami says we are continuing to lead an animal life. This is not to say that all pleasure and all comfort should be discarded and all pain must be embraced. That's not the point at all. To have certain pleasures in life, to have certain desires fulfilled in life, to avoid certain kinds of pain in life is actually the means to this journey. Because without that, we will not be able to even keep this body intact for this spiritual inquiry or for this spiritual journey. But that is only the means, and that acknowledgement becomes very, very important. Imagine this example. You go into the ocean in a small boat. We all like when the waters are calm, and we all don't like when the waters are rough. Now, if this entire journey of going through that ocean, I am only doing it based on this set of desires and fears that I have. I am only going towards calm waters, and I am always avoiding rough waters. Is it likely that I will get anywhere? I have given myself completely to nature, right? To the elements. The elements will decide where I go. Because I have fixed my mind, I'm just going to go towards calm waters, and I'm always going to avoid stormy, rough waters. But is it important to avoid rough waters? Yes, it is, because the rough waters can actually break the boat. Is it important to go towards calm waters? Yes, because you need respite every now and then. But if that alone defines how we are going to progress, then there will actually be no progress towards the destination. There will be only going around in circles. And today most of us do the mistake that we all indulge in is this, that we fill life's pursuit only with trying to attain what I like and trying to avoid what I dislike. Which means the means of this life completely occupies every bit of my time and effort in this life's journey. But if I am able to keep my mind on the end of this entire journey, I can manipulate the means a little bit, right? I can give myself a little bit of what I need at times. I need some rest at times. I need some peace at times. I need to avoid some conflicts at times. I need to give myself some pleasures at times. But I can at least ensure that I'm traveling towards the end. But if the end is not considered at all, if the end is not acknowledged at all, then the means will occupy all our time and effort. And that is what we refer to as samsara, right? The word samsara comes from the verb samsarati, apparently. Samsarati means to move around listlessly. And that is precisely what we will be doing if we give ourselves up to these two mistakes. One is not to begin this process of inquiry at all. Who am I? What am I here for? Is this all really life is about? Not asking these questions at all. And the second mistake is to continue to lead a life of an animal even after being given the life of a human being. What is it that we can do? As I said, let's not get ahead of ourselves and say that, okay, I've read this in this book, I've read this in this spiritual literature, this is what we need to do. Let us think that we are blank right now. As I said, going back to that analogy of the Robert Ludlum novel, I am blank. There are some hints in me. There is some things that I do, I'll get lost. There are some things, if I do, it will lead me towards a little bit of clarity. There are inputs that come from within. There are inputs that come from without. What can I do to ensure that from this state of nowhere, I'm at least getting somewhere? I'm going to just speak on this based on a very famous quote that Swami would often recall in his discourses, which I'm sure many of you must have heard. It's a 4-step process, if you could put it that way. Swami says, Tyaja durjana samsargam, bhaja sadhu samagamam, kuru punya mahoratram, smara nitya anityatam. 4 points. The first point in that is, Swami says, give up bad company. Tyaja durjana samsargam. Who are to be qualified as durjanas? Right? Again, going back to that analogy, the explanation of jantu. Durjana could actually mean those people who are constantly involved in such activity that actually takes them back to the womb again and again, who are lost in this cycle. Right? Durjana are those that are repeatedly making a mess of this opportunity that is given to them, isn't it? Can we avoid the company of those people or company of those kind of inputs in the mind that is going to take us further into delusion? The second point Swami makes is entertain good company. Bhaja sadhu samagamam. That company which inspires you to look at the purpose of this life. That company which allows us to put things in perspective, that something is not as important as we think it is. That this is the means and this is all the relevance and importance it has to be given. Let's not give it more importance than it is due. These 2 points, Swami says repeatedly, very, very important. Run away from bad company and entertain good company. Satsanga and keep away from bad company. Because as I said, we are born out of this duality of wisdom and ignorance, of immortality and mortality, which means both these set of inputs are coming from us from within. There are some things that we do which are purely divine traits, right? There are some qualities that come from us which actually are sparks of the divine. But there are also other thoughts which kind of remind us again and again that we are just this body. So when you have both these kind of inputs coming from the mind, I think the company that we keep decides which voice we are amplifying. Can we keep that company which leads us to more clarity? Can we avoid that company which takes us further and further into delusion? Of course, this comes with a lot of other nuances, not within the scope of this talk. It's not that everything has to be avoided, every company has to be avoided. Sometimes duty mandates us to keep the company of different kinds of people. But that's a different discussion. But as much as we can we entertain the company of those that allow us to think in the right way? It's a very beautiful discourse where Swami gives 3 qualities to look for in a person whose words that you can listen. Right? Very interestingly, Swami puts it. And in fact, speaking about that, Swami says, in today's day and age, you give a person money, he will tell you anything. So should you listen to anyone and everyone? And if you look at ourselves, that's precisely what we do. We are ready to listen to anyone and everyone. Whoever has a word of advice, we are ready to listen. Whoever puts it across in a way that it is interesting, we have a ear. Swami says, but those whose words you can live by, whose words of advice that you can accept and model and modify your life according to that, those people should be of those who have these 3 qualities. Swami says, Swartha Rahitudu. That person should be a Swartha Rahitudu, which means he or she must be selfless. The advice that they give should come from a state of selflessness. Right away, all of those people who speak to you in advertisements have been taken away from the list. All social influencers that we see in social media who are ready to give us advice because they have monetary benefits from that. Swami says the person who comes and gives you advice, who has nothing to gain from you following it or not following it. That is one of the qualities, right? It's not complete, it's one of the qualities. The second point, Swami says, Chitta Shuddhi Kaluginattivadu. Very, very clearly, Chitta Shuddhi Kaluginattivadu, which means a person who has a pure intellect. The person who is giving you advice may not get anything to gain from you, right? That's not always the best advice, because people can give you advice knowing very well that in no way it is going to affect them. But the person not only is selfless or does not have any self-interest in the advice that they are giving, but by nature, their mind is pure. By nature, which means they will not do or say something that will lead to harm consciously. Knowingly, they will not lead anyone to harm. So is that person a Swartha Rahitudu, a selfless person, and a Chitta Shuddhi Kaluginattivadu, a person with a pure intellect? And the third point Swami says is Adhyatmika Chittudu. Is he or she a person who is spiritual by nature? If the person is himself or herself so lost in the illusion of the world, if they themselves have not began this journey of asking, who am I? What is the purpose of life? What am I supposed to do in this life? Or they are so lost in the means of this life, of filling their lives with the pleasures and desires that they seek. Swami says that if you take the advice of such people, it is like one blind man leading another blind man. So can you look for people who have a certain amount of clarity in their own life? Those who are selfless, those whose minds are pure, who will not think of harming anyone, and whose minds are refined to the spiritual purpose of this life's journey. So those are the first 2 points Swami says. Avoid bad company, entertain good company. The third point Swami makes in that quote, or that quote Swami would speak about, is Kuru Punyam Mahoratram. Do meritorious deeds day and night. What is the value of this? What are meritorious deeds? Swami says selfless acts, acts of service, acts that come under duty. All of these karmas have the possibility or have the ability to purify this mind. Right? Swami says there is nothing better to purify the mind than karma. In fact, there's a very interesting quote that Swami makes in Prema Vahini. Swami says, sin is the manure on which Maya thrives. Right? When you do sinful acts, That is how the mind goes deeper and deeper into Maya or into illusion. So the corollary of that is the more meritorious your deeds are, the chances are that your mind will slowly start getting clarified and it will turn towards this journey that we are talking about, this self-inquiry that we are talking about. Right? So that is why doing meritorious deeds, when we talk about meritorious deeds, I said selfless acts. When will I do a selfless act? Actually, it's a paradox, as someone would say. There is nothing like a selfless act. Because when you go and help someone who's in need or someone who's in pain, nobody can deny the joy that comes out of that. Right? So there is no way that you can do an act of kindness without yourself benefiting from it. So there is actually no selfless act. But there are some acts which actually do not benefit this body and mind alone. When you do certain acts, there is a benefit that comes to us that is actually beyond this body and mind. If I am sharing the food that I have with somebody else, if I'm denying myself the food and giving it to someone else, it is not an act that is based out of this idea that I am this body, isn't it? The act itself stems from a thought that I am more than this body and mind. If I'm ready to put myself through some kind of an emotional or mental inconvenience so that the other person benefits, am I not very subtly acknowledging that I'm not just this mind? Similarly, when you do acts of duty, Swami says, when you're doing your duty, Swami makes this point in one of the discourses, he says, you are acknowledging that you are actually something like a small nut or a bolt in a huge machinery. You are making yourself feel like part of a whole, which means that act is stemming out of a certain attitude of oneness. So when we say doing meritorious acts without our knowledge, we do plenty of actions through the day. Some actions are born out of the idea that I am the body. Some actions are born out of the idea that I am this personality, this mind. But there are actions that come from this thought that I am more than this body and mind, and I need to dispense these activities. The more meritorious the activities, the actions that we perform day and night, Swami says, Kuru Punyam Ahoratram. The mind is slowly getting clarified in that whole process. And finally, a very, very important point, Swami says, Smara Nitya Anityatam. Pay attention to what is ephemeral and what is eternal. What is limited and what is unlimited. A very important sadhana that Swami would often reiterate and tell us that we must all do. As we go through this life, as we pursue pleasures, as we pursue our ambitions, as we fill our lives with relationships, friends, contacts, to constantly ask ourselves what is permanent, what is impermanent, who comes and goes, and who stays. I buy something, I attain something, I get a reward, I get a recognition. There is a certain happiness that comes from that. Is that happiness eternal? If it comes and goes, fine, that's all it is meant to do to me. It's meant to make me briefly happy. Should I give it more importance than that? What in this personality is actually permanent? Constantly asking yourself, is this all life is about? Just to strive for this much, or is there more to it? Whether we get an answer right away or not, I think that's besides the point. But are we even asking this question? Constantly are we asking ourselves, is this really worthwhile pursuing? Swami says somebody comes and praises you. Tomorrow someone comes and speaks ill of you. It's again something like the label that we all started off with. Someone comes and pastes this label saying that, oh, you're a good man. And we get delighted with it. Somebody comes and on their own pastes another label saying that, oh, you're an evil man. And we get upset about that. The more and more we start contemplating on what is real, what is unreal, what is nitya and what is anitya, we will take a better stock of life itself, isn't it? The most important thing that will happen in all of this is we will not get lost in the means. We are living in a world where to provide for this body and the needs of this mind, to provide for those who we have gathered around us and we claim as ours, our relationships, our family, our friends, is such a tall order already. Right? The means has become so very engaging that we all run the risk of forgetting the ends. So the most important thing that we really need to do is, are we constantly refocusing our mind on the ends? Are we constantly taking a step back? And that's why the smara nitya anityatam is such an important thing. Once a day, during your day, or once a week, once a month, I don't know how often you have to do it. But are we recalibrating our minds every now and then? And to be able to recalibrate, you need those other 2 points. Bhaja sadhu samagamam. Are you able to recalibrate your pursuits in life, your ambitions in life, based on the words of those whose words you can trust? And how fortunate you and I are that we have the one who embodies those 3 qualities to the best possible way, right? We spoke about the one who is selfless, the one who is pure, and the one who is having a adhyatmika chitta, right? Imagine we have that supreme being itself who has come in front of us, the very form or the very embodiment of purity. And if there is anything that we can be absolutely certain of when we speak about Swami, is he is absolutely selfless. And we have his words that we can use to constantly realign our lives, constantly recalibrate our mind and its aspirations and its desires. It is quite natural that this mind is going to be dragged into this. Right? Because the mind is going to go out of order doing what it is meant to do. We used to have this very interesting equipment in our chemistry laboratory. It was a balance, a weighing scale, which was very, very well tuned. Right? You could weigh substances to the 3rd decimal or 4th decimal of the gram. A very sensitive weighing balance. It used to be kept in a separate room. There can't be a fan around in that room. A lot of paraphernalia attached to preserving that balance. The most interesting thing about that balance is, once you use that balance to weigh a compound or a substance, suppose I'm going to use that balance the next day, that balance actually would have lost its calibration. I will have to recalibrate that balance before I use it. Right? So there will be some standard weights with which I have to balance that and calibrate that balance, and then I should use it. It's very interesting that balance is meant for measuring things. And when it measures things, when it is doing what it is meant for, what it was created for, it goes out of order. Same is the case with the human mind. We are meant to engage with what it takes to lead this life. We are meant to go out, use it for our corporate job, use it for our family, whatever the needs are there in the family, use it for human interaction every day. But in the process of using this mind for what it was meant for, it will go out of calibration. And we will have to recalibrate it again and again and again. And for that, we need to turn to these standard weights for us, which is Swami's words. Keep refocusing this mind again and again and again. If all of this was too much and you feel too many jargons, too many things to keep in mind, if I were to make it absolutely simple, or I'm not making it absolutely simple. If I were to go back to Swami's message and look at it, Swami says, forget all of this. Forget about the enquiry. Forget about who am I. If there is one thing that we can do, and this I'm saying based on the little bit of understanding I've got from reading what Swami has said, Swami says, develop selfless love. All of this can be put into that one statement that Swami makes: love all, serve all. It seems like a very simple thing, right? Sometimes when you look at some of these simple statements that Swami makes, we tend to think they are way too simple. Spirituality should be a little more complex than that. But the reality is, this entire journey is contained in that one phrase: love all, serve all. Because right now we are going about life loving those whom we like, filling our lives with things that we like, which means my mind is in such a state that it can be happy and peaceful only when it has certain things with it, only when it has certain people around, only with certain circumstances. When I say I'm going to try to love all, it only means, can I keep my mind in such a state that it is going to become independent of the people in front of me, the circumstances around me, the events that happen in my life. Swami makes this beautiful point in one of his discourses. He says, man is so obsessed with the Navagrahas, right? In the astrology, we have these 9 planets which they say rule our destiny. Swami says, man is so obsessed with these Navagrahas. He's always scared of them. The reality is, there are only 2 grahas that actually dictate man's life. The 2 grahas are raga and dvesha, like and dislike. And we are leading our entire life defined by what we like and what we dislike, trying to pursue what we like, trying to avoid what we dislike. And these 2 together is what is referred to as desires. But the moment I change this game and I say that whatever comes to my life, I am going to try and have the same attitude towards it. Whoever comes to my life, that person may come to me with the label that they belong to me, or they may come to me with the label that they are strangers. Can I love them unconditionally? We are literally changing the game that we are playing here. Instead of pursuing what we like and avoiding what we dislike, we are saying that I'm going to find the means to like everything that comes to me. In conclusion, there's a very beautiful episode that I'd like to quickly recall. We all know the great devotee of Swami, the first Vice Chancellor of Swami's University, Mr. V.K. Gokak. A literary giant. He is supposed to be a brilliant writer in multiple languages, Kannada and English. He was a doyen of English literature. We've heard him translate Swami's discourses. There are some really scholarly articles that he has written on Swami, books that he has written on Swami. A man of words, to put it in the least of terms. Apparently one day Swami walks up to him and Swami asks him, Gokak, what is love? And recollecting this episode, V.K. Gokak could say that all my literary knowledge collapsed. All my knowledge of English and literature and everything that I'd read and gathered collapsed because I couldn't define this simple word love. And I stood there in front of Swami blank. How do you define love? And Swami stood there and Swami said, tell, what is love? And he said, Swami, he was tongue-tied, he didn't know what to reply. And in the sweetest way, Swami patted him and Swami said, love is selflessness, self is lovelessness. And Swami walked away. And as he was contemplating this simple line, love is selflessness, self is lovelessness, he said, nobody could have defined it better. This journey is nothing but this idea of selfishness to that idea of that expansive self, that whatever I do, I'm doing to myself. Whoever I serve, I'm serving myself. Whoever I love, I'm loving myself. So this journey from lovelessness to selflessness, from being self-centered to that state of love, and we have had the definition, we have had that example in front of us, right, in the form of Swami himself. And if all of this is very difficult for us to follow, Swami says, love me and look for me in every single person you encounter. Right? In fact, that is the final journey, as Krishna beautifully describes in one of his shlokas in the Gita. He says, whoever sees me in everyone, and whoever sees everyone as being contained in me, he has seen the tattva. He has seen the ultimate truth. So which path we take, which path or which part of the path we are in, it really doesn't matter. But all of these talks like these, satsangs, whatever we read in Swami's discourses, whatever we hear, tune into our discourse stream and listen to Swami's voice, these are all means by which we literally shake ourselves a little and say that don't get lost in the means, focus on the end. Recalibrate this mind. Are we moving towards that destination? Because we have been given a precious opportunity. Once when I was interacting with some devotees, somebody asked this question. What is the best kind of seva towards animals that we can take up? Right? Because they were beginning some seva projects and they wanted to serve animals in need, abandoned animal and cattle. Has Swami said anything about it? I don't remember what answer I gave them, but I was thinking about this question for some time. The answer to that is contained in that same statement, Jantunam Narajanma Durlabham. Among all the jantus, you and I have been given an opportunity, which they have been denied. The greatest service that we can do to other animal forms is, having been born as humans, having consumed so much of resources of this Mother Earth, to ensure that we are actually moving towards that goal for which this human birth was meant for. Right? Because we know as a human race what kind of drain on the resources of this earth we are. Having taken so much from all the other living beings, if we are continuing to live an animal life, it is a betrayal of what we are doing to these other animals, isn't it? We are betraying them. Having been born a human being, can we ensure that we were born in darkness, but we will not die in darkness? Because almost like every lifetime is going to be a reset. Right? That's why I said, yes, death is an eventuality which is going to come. But before that, there is this opportunity to seek and find clarity. And that is the greatest opportunity this is. And these were the few thoughts I wanted to share. As I said, these are Swami's words given in various discourses. It has indeed come through this intellect. So if there are any flaws, I seek your forgiveness for that. I seek your kind indulgence for that. But the only fond request is, please continue to pour into Swami's message. If any of you are interested in what were the discourses that were referred to for this talk, at least 3 or 4, I think we'll try and leave the links to those discourses in the description. As I mentioned, 1973 Summer Showers, where Swami spoke about the Bhaja Govindam. The Shivratri discourse that Swami delivered in the year 1997. Swami's Sandeha Nivarani, where Swami speaks about the journey of the soul through that beautiful folk song. It has also been very beautifully translated by Professor Kasturi, which is there in a chapter in Sandeha Nivarani. If any of you know of other discourse links and other discourse references that are in line with whatever was shared today, I think you should feel free to leave it in the comment section. As Swami would say, that this is a journey that we've undertaken together. We are here to enthuse each other, to ensure that this special opportunity that we've got, not only are we born a human being, not only somewhere Swami has sparked this inquiry in our minds, but more importantly, we have found Swami. No other life is going to be as special as this. We must do as much as we can in this lifetime. And that is what we owe to Swami. With these few thoughts and placing my gratitude at Bhagwan's lotus feet, I also thank all of you for your very, very patient listening. I offer this effort at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Thank you. Jai Sai Ram.
Thank you.